The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in mode.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to our friends out east. And I'm obviously not this attractive young lady right here on the screen, Poppy Behrens. My name is Keith Rawson. I am the social media coordinator for the Mini Storage Messenger, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Okay. Now, we're delighted to have you in the audience today, and I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. This is one of several informative webinars planned for self-storage owners, operators, managers, investors, developers, and other industry professionals. All right. The sponsor of today's webinar is Phoenix, Arizona-based Minico Insurance Agency, LLC. Since 1974, Minico has served the self-storage industry with unparalleled expertise, quality products, and friendly customer service. Its superior insurance programs are designed specifically for the self-storage industry in order to protect you, your business, and your customers. All right. Today's speakers are Jim Clemenson and Keith McDonald. All right. Jim is the Senior Vice President of Insurance Operations for Minico Insurance, the Minico Insurance Agency, and is responsible for the claims, underwriting, regulatory compliance, and policyholder service operations for Minico. His extensive insurance background includes leadership roles with Royal Insurance, Western Heritage Insurance, Berkshire Hathaway Home State Companies, and several other firms, as well as leading his own insurance consulting firm. Keith McDonald is the Customer Care Manager for Minico Insurance and is responsible for maintaining Minico's high level of customer service for both self-storage professionals and independent insurance agents. He has over 15 years of customer service experience, including previous management position with Sureguard Storage Incorporated. Now, I want to, we're going to invite you to submit questions throughout the webinar. Simply type your question in the question area and click send. Now, depending on the question, we will answer it privately or to the whole group. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during the question and answer period at the end of the webinar. Those that we can't answer due to time will be answered via email after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on demand on our archives at ministoragemessenger.com. Okay. Today's presentation should run about 45 minutes, with the remainder of the hour open to questions and answers. And now,
all right, so let's first start out by just getting our hands around the management. Basically, every day we face risks in our businesses or at home. Even while we're driving our car to the store produces some amount of risk. But to understand how to deal with risk, we first really need to understand what definition is a systematic process to consider the likelihood that a threat will endanger an asset, individual, or function, and to identify actions to reduce the risk. So that's kind of a mouthful. So what does that really mean? Basically, it means we need to be aware of the risks that are present and monitor them for changes. So it means we need to have training, systems, communication plans in place to support an effective strategy. And really what this webinar will be focused on today is on risk management at your self-storage facility, specifically how offering a tenant insurance program is an important piece of your overall plan. Let me take us to the next slide. Excuse me. So risk management elements. What I'd like to look at is just what are some of the basic things that you can do to manage risk around your self-storage facility.
Keith, you're cutting
First
out
is I'm sorry?
You're cutting out on us on the audio.
Is that any better?
Yeah, much.
Okay. And maybe if the other presenters would mute, we'll see if that helps.
Absolutely.
I'll talk a little slower as well, everybody. So the first is to limit the high-risk activities like climbing up on a roof, changing the storefront banners, even high or difficult to reach light bulbs can provide risk. Next is hiring professionals to perform risky jobs. Again, it sounds very simple, but watching the expenses is near and dear to all of us, but paying a licensed and bonded professional to perform risky jobs can cost you much less in the long run than having an employee or yourself do it and possibly get injured or miss work. Next, servicing your complex equipment by trained experts. Many of the facilities today have high-tech devices like gates, elevators, sprinkler systems, etc., that not only can be complicated to work on, but if improperly serviced, can result in high-cost repairs. The next bullet, purchasing insurance to transfer risk. This is the element that most of us think of in a risk management strategy. So insurance is basically just the transfer of risk of a financial loss to an insurance company in return for the premiums that you pay. So properly insuring your business is a central element of your strategy, of course. And next, developing procedures for facility maintenance and hold regular staff meetings to promote safety within your facility. It's really important that you demonstrate to your employees how important safety is to your operation. And it's also a good idea to keep notes on what was discussed and even track who attends these meetings. And next is stay alert to the potential risks around you. It's easy to often become so familiar with your property that potential risk can be overlooked. It's sort of like when you're making that same drive home day after day. Sometimes you find yourself pulling into the driveway and barely remember anything about the drive home. So you really have to focus on training yourself to search for risks at your facility. And lastly, an idea like contracting with snow removal services, obviously where applicable. Now you may have more unique risks in your area to consider, but the main point again is to take the time to set up plans before those seasonal risks might arise. Let's pause for a second and I'll turn it over to Jim and he'll take us through some of the steps on how you'd actually build your risk management strategy. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Keith. Good morning, everyone. Glad you joined us. Let's talk about building a risk management strategy. One of the first things that you should consider is to perform an assessment of your entire property for any broken or dangerous items. They could include buildings with sharp edges, cracks in the concrete, broken lights. And as you do this, you'll want to make a list of those items so that you can follow up with any corrective action that you deem necessary. Next would be to review all of your contracts and lease agreements, and it's a good idea to do that on a regular basis with your attorney and your professional insurance agent who can both help you. Also, regularly have safety equipment inspected. And what I mean by safety equipment, for example, elevators, sprinkler systems, power gates, fire alarms. Items such as this should be regularly inspected and serviced in some instances by the appropriate repair and inspection facilities. And develop a checklist. You know, creating a checklist for your employees with items to do, some on a daily basis, some on a weekly, some on a monthly. And these could include things like checking lighting, walkways, gates, locks, roof seams, fencing, and as Keith mentioned earlier, snow removal is always a key item in many states, and so to address that and have that on a checklist is important as well. And then review your commercial insurance coverages with your agent and discuss any enhancements or changes that you've had in your facility so that your agent knows that. And don't forget the importance of appropriate limits on customer goods legal liability and sale and disposal liability. And last but not least, an effective risk management strategy would certainly include tenant insurance. Going to the next slide, Keith. How does tenant insurance help your risk management plan? Specifically, tenant insurance or customer storage insurance is a contract between the tenant and an insurance company to provide payment in the event of a covered loss. In other words, it makes it between the tenant and the insurance company who writes the customer storage insurance versus if your tenant doesn't have that insurance, who do you think they're going to be turned to? They're going to turn to you, and then it'll be between you and them. So this kind of takes you out of the picture, puts it between the tenant and the insurance company, which is a win-win situation. Keith's going to talk now about some of the common losses that would be covered. Keith?
All right, thank you, Jim. Well, as you can see, there are numerous events here that can affect your facility and consequently your tenants. Items that are covered typically under a tenant insurance program would be burglary, lightning, windstorm, hail, water damage, fire, smoke, earthquake and building collapse, explosion, vandalism, and riot. So many of these items you have little or no control over preventing them from happening. However, if one of the above situations were to affect your facility and the tenant did not have their property insured, one possibility is that the tenant will approach you to see if your commercial insurance policy will cover them. Now, one of the things you want to do as a business owner is probably reduce the risk of the chance of filing a commercial insurance claim. If your roof leaks over 10 to 20 units in a large rainstorm, and if you were aware that your roof will leak in a situation like that, you could be potentially found liable for the damage. So putting in a commercial insurance claim on your commercial policy, you would oftentimes have losses that could impact your insurability. Possibly your premiums could increase or the policy could be canceled altogether. Increased involvement of your personnel by the need of being interviewed and things like that. And there's always the chance of litigation, being taken to court over the situation where the tenant had a loss, and if there is some chance that they're going to ask you to file a claim on your commercial insurance, but you really don't think you're liable, it may go to court in order to prove that point. So if we were to go to a lawsuit in a situation like this, Jim can touch on some of the things as the manager of all of our claims. He's familiar with seeing these types of things. So Jim, what are some of the types of things a lawsuit might bring on?
Well, Keith, first thing that we all need to be aware of is you don't have to be negligent or at fault to be sued. Anybody can sue anybody for any reason. And when you are sued and there is a lawsuit against you, you find that there's an awful lot of time and energy taken away from your self-storage business for you and your employees, especially when depositions are taken, or there's testimony. If it would go to court, there's the court time. And then the jury unpredictability. I don't know anybody that can predict exactly what a jury is likely to do. There's also negative public reactions and relations in many cases if it happens to hit the newspapers or become common knowledge. So, if you take the example of a windstorm, we've seen situations where an unforeseen windstorm, 80-mile-an-hour winds come up and damage a facility. And it's amazing that the claims that will come out of that against the facility owner, even small claims lawsuits and other lawsuits, because they have nowhere else to turn. So individual tenant insurance policies may be a very positive answer to that. Let's take a look at how does tenant insurance strengthen your plan. Let's look at the possible outcome, let's say, of a leaky roof situation. If your tenant has insurance, the tenant would file a claim directly with the insurance company, in all likelihood, and not the facility manager. The tenant has a named peril policy to easily identify if their loss is covered, and the customer and the facility personnel can work together to provide any needed information to the insurance company. Claims are handled usually very quickly, and paid tenants are happy tenants. You contrast that with a tenant that doesn't have customer storage insurance. As Keith mentioned before, tenants often direct their attention to the facility for payment, feeling, okay, I should be paid. They may try to place the blame on the owner or the manager or the facility, and there's a potential cost to the operation associated with defending a customer's accusations in and out of court. And then there's the unhappy or possible lost customer over the whole situation, which is never good. So bottom line, none of those are very attractive, as is possible negative effect on your commercial insurance. So those are the reasons that tenant insurance is so important to your operation.
All right, so if we talk about insurance, as most of us view it the same way, is it's rarely thought of positively. That is, until something bad does happen. And we know that you work hard to provide your facility in a clean, dry, and secure place for customers, but as we mentioned, you can't always control all the risks completely. Just take a look at some of these recent headlines. So the heaviest snowfall in recent history, tornado touchdown sighted, driver loses control and smashes into a local storage facility, high winds and hail damaged buildings, or the bottom picture is obviously very scary, where a fire swept through an entire self-storage property. So, you know, no matter how prepared you are, you can't prevent all the bad things from happening at your self-storage facility. So if we look at offering tenant insurance more from a customer service standpoint as well as a risk management, we know that competition is tough out there. I know, you know, in speaking with many self-storage facility owners and managers, you do a lot of things that you can to offer additional products and services to help set you apart from that competition. And it's important from a customer standpoint to demonstrate how you care about the customer, and one of the ways is by offering tenant insurance, is giving them an option if they do need insurance. It's important, as many people do, taking the time to inform your customer that their items are not insured by the facility. You have it in your lease that states that, but that's one of the most critical times, obviously, as you're walking through the lease agreement, explaining that they're not insured. And then it's nice if you have an option for them to take if they do say, where do I go for my insurance? Also really important, just don't assume that every tenant already has insurance or that they won't pay. My years when I worked for SureGuard Self-Storage, you know, that was something that we came across every day, was having those conversations about offering tenant insurance. And sometimes when an employee is faced with bringing up the subject, they're worried that the extra $8 with their rent may be the deal breaker. But again, it's important not to assume that, and make sure and just present it and offer it to every customer. Next, as I said, offer it to everyone and every time, making sure that your employees are properly trained on what to say and how to say it. A low-cost individual tenant insurance policy may be a better answer than filing a claim against their homeowners policies. So that's something we hear about homeowners, or you know, can I just do that, file a claim on my homeowners insurance if something happens? You know, that's a really individual case-by-case basis where the customer would need to look at their homeowners policy. But in many cases, from a deductible standpoint alone, tenant insurance typically has low deductibles like $100, and oftentimes a homeowner's insurance policy has a higher deductible. And then lastly, just let the insurance provider help you and your customer with questions. Any of the companies that you would deal with in setting up a tenant insurance program have support, training materials, 800 numbers, where if you're there with a customer and they're looking at maybe a brochure and they have questions about what does it cover, it's a great time to pick up the phone right while your customer is there with you and call the company and let the experts in the insurance go ahead and deal with some of those difficult questions. We wouldn't expect that everybody working in the facility would need to be an expert in insurance. So how do you get started? By being a part of this webinar, some of you today may not have a tenant insurance program, so really our main focus is to try to help you understand how it does help you from risk management. So if you don't, first step is just be proactive about getting started with the program today. Determine what type of program best fits your self-storage operation. There's typically two different types of programs, where either you would have brochures on your counter that you would hand to your customers, or there are operations that can set up a pay with rent program where the premium is included with the rent. Now, it all really would depend on the size of your operation, the type of management software you have, your clientele, even your staffing, whether you have people at your facility all the time or not, will help you pick the best program for your needs. And incorporate your tenant insurance program into all of your training and procedural materials. That's an important part. Usually when people get started on a program like that, they're heavily involved. They train their employees. But as time goes on, unless you've documented that and really made it a part of your training, it's easy for that to kind of fall to the wayside. And then an important part is in informing all of your new and current tenants. New tenants, obviously, when they come in, you're talking about the lease. That's an easy time to do it. But current tenants, you may have 85% occupancy with hundreds and hundreds of tenants, and you may not know how any of them are dealing with their insurance. So if you have a way of communicating through email or through billing statements, it's a good idea once you start a program to go ahead and let them know. And lastly, just stick with it. Again, ready to answer some of the questions. Let me turn it back over to Jim for just a moment. He has a special offer for those of you who are attending our webinar today.
Thanks, Keith. I'm glad Keith let me do the special offer part, because I always like special offers for special listeners who take the time and make the effort to learn more about their business. We have $50 off of the 2011 Self-Storage Almanac, and that's print, digital, or print and digital combination. To order, as you can see on your screen, www.ministoragemessenger.com, and then you would enter promo code CSI1 at the checkout, or you can contact Keith Rawson at krawson, R-A-W-S-O-N, at minico.com, or call our 800 number, which is 800-528-1056, extension 3526, and mention promo code CSI1. This is a limited time offer, and it expires on March 17th, so please step forward. To learn more about Minico, please, for tenant insurance, please call 1-800-253-5858. Our commercial insurance is 1-800-447-8383. Our publications is 1-800-352-4636, or you can email customercare@minico.com. Again, we want to thank you very much. I'm going to turn this back over to Keith Rawson for the questions and answers.
Sure thing, guys. And I have a few questions. Coming from our audience on here. First off, for Jim, I've got a question from Molly from Florida. You mentioned lawsuits. Can you give me some examples of lawsuits where the storage facility was not negligent, yet tenants may make claims when they didn't have tenant insurance?
Sure. The first one that pops to mind is Hurricane Ike. We actually had tenants making claims against the facilities on Hurricane Ike. And the windstorm example that I used earlier on is an actual one. We had a very high windstorm, really 80-mile-an-hour winds, and some of the tenants made claims against the facility.
Okay. All right. All right. Now, here's another good question for you, Jim. You guys mentioned that, and this is from Jerry in Iowa, you guys mentioned assessing the property for broken or dangerous items. Do you have any tips for this procedure?
Sure. One of the things you can consider doing is ask your insurance agent to join you as you perform an assessment and walk the property and look for items that might warrant your attention. That gives your insurance agent a really good opportunity to work with you and to see your operation and to make recommendations, so you kind of kill two birds with one stone. It's always a good idea to take many pictures of it before and after. If you do find a situation where you need a repair or something taken care of, taking pictures of it before, documenting the repair and what you did with the specific dates is a really good idea. And don't forget the interior and exterior lighting. Lighting is so critically important, and so you might even want to consider a local lighting expert to join you as you look through the facility to make any recommendations, because if there's any local codes, lighting codes of any kind, they would be apt to know. And last of all, we've mentioned, I think, is snow removal. That is very, very important. So factor that in to any assessments you have. Even if you do an assessment in July and you're in the snow belt states, it's never too early to plan for the winter months.
Absolutely. And Keith, I think you can cover this one right here. This is from Ken. Do I have to be licensed to offer tenant insurance at my facility?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on two things. It depends on the type of program you decide to go with, and it depends on the state that you're in. So some of the states require that when you're offering a program that is like a pay with rent, where you would be a little bit more involved in actually setting up the customer in your system as to what level of insurance they would like to purchase. You're collecting the premiums. Some states will require that you go through a quick and easy limited insurance license process. For the programs where you're setting out a brochure out on the counter, you're much less involved. It's more of an informational piece that you're passing along, and then using the insurance company to deal directly with the customer to actually set up the policy and issue it to them. So it'll depend on what program, and then if you decide you want to do a pay-with-rent type program, the company you're dealing with will talk with you about what state you're in and then find out if you would need to go through the procedures. But when you do need a license, it's typically a quick and easy process.
Okay. And I have another one here for you, Keith, is what if the customer says they have homeowners insurance already?
Well, that comes up a lot. I touched on it just briefly in the webinar, but it's important that most people think their homeowners insurance is pretty much an all-encompassing policy that covers them in anything they're doing. And it's just really important to know, does it cover off-premises storage? So that's the first item. And even if it does, what does it cover within the policy? So by comparing it to what is available in a tenant insurance policy, the customer ultimately can make a good decision as to, are they getting the proper coverage? And also, even if it is covered, again, back to that deductible or back to filing the claims on your homeowners, a tenant insurance policy is a low-cost policy for a temporary situation while in storage. So for a minimal amount of premium, it may be a better option in some cases where people will purchase that. If they do have an issue where they need to file a claim, it's isolated to that policy, the low deductible that needs to be paid, and that way their homeowners insurance wouldn't necessarily have to be involved at all. But again, it's really important that the customer just kind of review what they have in their policy and have an option to make the best decision.
And I think this will be our last question. This is from Angus. Angus wanted to know, can you make, and this is for either Jim or Keith, now can you make insurance a part of, can you make it mandatory for a tenant to actually have it on their unit?
I can take that one, Jim.
Okay.
You know, there are some operations that really see the value in offering the tenant insurance program. And as a company, they can make a decision if they want to require that a customer has their goods insured. Now, that can fall on the customer may need to just provide that they have proof of insurance. That could be through their homeowner's insurance or an existing policy, or purchase the one that's available at the facility. So I believe that, you know, there is a way for a company to set that up as a preference where they're making the decision if we're going to take on a customer in order to store in our facility, it's important for us to make sure that you do have insurance. But it most times includes the option that if the customer shows proof of insurance from another source, that'll be acceptable.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps everything up for today, guys. For everyone else who had questions, we're going to make sure to get in contact with you later on today or tomorrow to answer any questions to answer the rest of your questions. And I do want to thank everybody for attending today. We hope we've provided you with useful information to assist you in your investment or your development endeavors. You will receive an email shortly with the link to the archive presentation. So watch for your inbox your email. And also, we are going to be sending off emails for that promotion for the Self-Storage Almanac. So keep an eye out for that as well too. All right. So, and Jim and Keith, once again I want to thank you both for being here today and providing us with this presentation.
We're glad to do it.
Thank you, everybody. We enjoyed it.
All right. And once again, everyone, please thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.